All right, we got 10 viewers so far on Facebook, in addition to those that are here with us in the Zoom. Of course, I'll try to moderate for any questions that come into the chat or anything that shows up in comments. And
yeah, if you want to answer whatever questions come up in the chat, or leave them till the end, I'll answer all my questions at the end.
Okay. Yeah, and if there's something that's timely that shows up, then I might interrupt you at that point, if that's okay. Or actually, do you want to wait until the end?
Yeah, just put everything to the end. It has sort of a flow to it, and I just don't want to break the momentum.
Fair enough. Okay, will do. So it is top of the hour, and back in my Cub Scout days, you say we'll start on time with a 5-minute break, but I don't like doing that. So we'll go ahead and get started right now. I am so thrilled that I have the opportunity to work with so many different people in our industry that are so well respected. They're great speakers. They have a great message, and I believe that nobody has such a powerful message and has gotten it out there better than Mr. David McKnight, who is the author of The Power of Zero, which is, if you haven't heard of it, what rock are you in? Or are you brand new to the industry? So welcome. The other one is the documentary. If you haven't seen it, you need to see the documentary, The Tax Train is Coming. You can see the trailer. Actually, you can see it on my website. I've got a copy, which you gave.
I'll show it today.
Perfect. Because you gave perfect copyright rights to anybody want to put it on their website, and like I have that documented just in case it should ever come up. Say I'm allowed. I have this here, so I have it on my website where I also talk about the national debt, and I know you're going to go through a lot of that stuff because this is some scary stuff economically speaking. That we're going through, but I want to turn the time over to you. I do not want to impede with your flow and your message because I've never heard you speak directly, so I'm looking forward to this myself. So take it away. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for having me. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your schedule. We'll go about 35, 40 minutes, then we'll open up for questions. And then we'll,
you know what? I apologize. I need to hit record. Because I know it's recording to Facebook, but I want to make sure I record it also because I want to upload it to YouTube. And of course, if you want to upload it to your channel as well, because I know you've got a very much a sizable YouTube channel. So let me get remote control real quick. And then once I start the recording, I'll send it right back over to you. I hope this works. Leave it to technology.
When I signed, for what it's worth, when I signed up, it says it's being recorded.
Okay, well, it's probably just being recorded on Facebook. I'll figure it out from there because it's not hitting record on here. So that's all right. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Let's see here. There we go. All right. So thanks for having me, everybody. We're going to go about 40 minutes, then we'll open up for questions. I usually like to start these things off with a quiz, and the first question on the quiz is simply this. And by the way, this is normally a very interactive presentation. I typically do it 90 times a year live and in person, and ask a lot of questions. I sort of have created dialogue with the audience. We won't have that luxury here today, but as I ask you these questions, you sort of turn them over in your mind and see what you make of them. First question on my quiz is simply this: what is the highest marginal tax bracket in the history of our country? What's the worst it's ever been? And the last 2 years of World War II, the highest marginal tax bracket was 94%. And that was for any dollar you made above and beyond $200,000. Now, $200,000 back then was a pretty big deal. It was about $3.2 million in today's dollars. Can you even think of anybody back then that made that type of money? Well, there was an actor who later became a politician. Remember who that was? That's right, Ronald Reagan. If you study Ronald Reagan's biography, he talks about how he never made more than 2 movies in a year. Reason being, he made about $100,000 per movie. And any dollar he made above and beyond $200,000, he only kept 6 cents on the dollar. And truth be told, he didn't even get to keep the 6 cents. Who do you think got the 6 cents? That's right, the state of California to pay for state tax. So it literally did not make sense for Reagan to work past the month of June. So you take the rest of your off, you go to his ranch, you ride horses, you start making movies again January 1st the following year. So that was a long time ago. Let's fast forward to the decade of the 70s. What was the worst federal marginal tax bracket you could pay throughout the entire decade of the 70s. Well, this is easy to remember. Throughout the entire decade of the 70s, worst federal marginal tax bracket you could pay was 70%. Once again, for any dollar, you made above and beyond $200,000. Now let's fast forward to today. Pardon me. Let's fast forward to today. What is the highest marginal tax bracket today? What is the tax rate at which Bill Gates pays taxes on most of his earned income? It's 37%. So here is my question, and this is not a trick question. How does 37 stack up? How does 37 stack up against some of these tax rates we've experienced in the past? What do you think? You might be thinking it's pretty low, and it's interesting you might think that because, like I said, I do this workshop all across the country, routinely ask rooms full of people, hey, how bad are taxes today? And what do you think they say? They say terrible, horrible, as bad as they've ever been. What's the truth? The truth is that tax rates today are just about as low as we've seen in our lifetime. However, something's going to happen to that tax bracket January 1st, 2026. What's going to happen to it? Is it going to go up or is it going to go down? It's going to go up. What's it going to go up to? It's going to go up to 39.6. And guess what? In order for that to happen, all Congress has to do is nothing. Is Congress pretty good at doing nothing? You bet they are. Now, is 39.6 enough to keep me awake at night? Well, 39.6 is what tax rates were throughout the entire decade of the 90s. You guys remember how the stock market was doing in the 90s? Was it doing okay? Yes, it was doing great. In fact, if you dropped $100,000 into the S&P 500 in 1990, took a nap for 9 years, woke up in 1999, what would that 100,000 have been worth? It would have been worth about $600,000. So your money would have sextupled during the decade of the 90s alone. And that's under these kind of tax rates. So again, not enough to keep me awake at night. So the real question I have for you is this: what is likely to happen to tax rates as we move beyond 2026? Move forward in time to 2028, 2030 and beyond. What does your gut tell you? Are tax rates down the road likely to be higher or lower than 39.6? Raise your hand if you think higher. Okay, so that's just about everybody. So I'm with you. So for those of you who think the tax rates down the road are likely to be higher than 39.6, my question for you is why? What will we be spending money on as a country that could literally force tax rates to go up? What are the big ticket items? Well, the one thing we always start talking about is the debt. And how much debt do we owe? That's 30 trillion. We just scream past 30 trillion. It's a 3 and a 0 followed by 12 zeros. And by the way, it's not so much the debt that I'm worried about, it's the interest on the debt, the cost of renting the money that we've already spent. And who do we owe that money to? We owe some of that to ourselves. We borrowed some of it from Social Security, but who else do we owe a lot of that money to? That's right, China. I don't know if you guys realize, but just recently the US Treasury came out with a new $100 bill. Did you guys see that? I think it's because China's got all the old ones. It's not going to get any better than that. I apologize. So we got the debt, we got the interest on the debt. What's driving that debt? Well, we got Medicare, we got Medicaid, Social Security. You know, COVID-19 blew a massive hole in our economy. We had to build a bridge across that abyss in our economy, and that bridge costs about $6 trillion. We had to borrow all that. We borrowed more money in 1 year than we did in the previous 6 years combined. Here's an interesting one, pensions. The other day I was talking to a lady. I said, hey, what happens to your pension if your company goes broke? She says, don't worry, Dave, no matter what happens to my company, the federal government guarantees I will always receive 2/3 of my pension every year till I die. Folks, that's what we call an unfunded obligation. What's an unfunded obligation? It's a promise the federal government's made that they can't afford to keep. Some experts say that what the federal government's promised that they can't afford to pay is about $125 trillion. But there's a very famous economist by the name of Dr. Larry Kotlikoff out of Boston University, foremost expert in the world on what we call fiscal gap accounting. And what he does is he projects out over the next 75 years, everything that we promised to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt. He projects out over that same time period what we can actually afford to deliver under today's tax rates. And he says, hey, if there's a difference between those two numbers, then your country has a fiscal gap. And that's its true national debt. He says the real national debt's not 30 trillion. It's not even 125 trillion. He says it's much closer to $239 trillion. What does that mean? That means that we would have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today, earning treasury rates to be able to deliver on everything that we've promised that we can't afford to pay. And the list goes on and on and on. But if you had to pick two things on this list, that will make debt go up more over time than any two other things, which two would you pick? Well, if you said Medicare and Social Security, you'd be absolutely correct. Let's see if we can sort of wrap our brains around why. I'm going to open up a brief parenthesis just on Social Security alone, another quiz. When was Social Security first established? When did they first roll out Social Security? Was a linchpin of the New Deal, the hallmark of the Roosevelt administration, so 1935. And when they first started out, how many workers were putting money into the program for every one person that took money out? What did that ratio look like? Well, it was 42 to 1. You had 42 workers putting money in for every one person that took money out. And back then, how old did you have to be to draw on Social Security? Well, you couldn't touch it till age 65. Anybody want to take a stab at what the average life expectancy was back then? It was 62. They didn't even anticipate that the average person would live long enough to ever draw on Social Security. If you were lucky enough to make it to 65, how long did you draw on Social Security before you tipped over dead? Only a couple of years. So in summary, when Social Security first started out, you had all these people putting money in, hardly anybody taking money out. And when they took it out for 2 years, and then they died. Was Social Security pretty solvent when it first started out? You bet it was. It was set up to last forever. And then something happened. Soldiers came home from World War II, and they started to do something at a rate at which they never done it before. What they start doing? That's right. They started to have kids. In fact, if you look at demographic trends over the last 100 years or so, it looks a little bit like this. You start off at the turn of the century with what we call the Henry Ford generation. These are our World War II vets. Remember what Tom Brokaw called these folks? That's right, the greatest generation. They were followed by what we call the silent generation, still sort of reeling from the Great Depression. And then what do we call this big statistical anomaly in the middle here? We call this the baby boomers. So as it turns out, my mom was one of the very first baby boomers. She was born January 17th, 1946. And when was the last baby boomer born? 64. So at 18 years of unprecedented procreation. Now, how many baby boomers do we have in our country today? 78 million, single largest voting bloc in the country. You'll see why that's important here in a second. Now, did baby boomers have a few children of their own? Yes, they had a few. I call this Generation X. I am a Generation Xer. I imagine David is also a Generation Xer. And when we had children of our own, we call these Generation Y. I've got 7 kids. That's exactly what I asked myself in the middle of the night. Now, as you look at this chart, the baby boomers, these folks in the middle, have nearly as many children as their parents did. The answer is no, not even close. They had almost 30 million fewer children. So if you were to ask yourself today, how many workers are putting money into Social Security for every one person that takes money out? What does that ratio look like today? Yeah, that's right, a little bit lower than 3 to 1. In another 10 years, what's that going to look like? Try 2 to 1. And what's the earliest you can draw on Social Security today? You can actually draw as early as 62. And if you start at 62, how long will you continue to draw before you tip over dead? 23 years until age 85. Folks, is Social Security today just a little bit different than when it first started out? You bet it is. It started off as insurance against living too long, and it slowly morphed into a pension program that covers us for nearly a quarter of our lives. Well, how many of you guys have heard of this guy right here, David Walker? He was what we call the Comptroller General of the federal government. He was the head of the Government Accountability Office. He's on the board of Social Security. He's the nation's chief auditor. He's basically the CPA of the USA. He did that for 10 years under Bush and Clinton. The reason I'm talking about it is because David Walker knows more about these numbers than just about anyone else on the planet. And he took one look at the books and he said, hey, we have promised way more than we can afford to deliver. He says, you think Social Security is bad? He says, Medicare is 5 times more expensive. He said to be able to deliver on these 2 promises alone, he said this back in 2009, he said, we would have to double taxes immediately. He said, you don't have to double taxes immediately, but for every year that you postpone doubling taxes, the national debt will grow by $2 trillion per year on average each and every year until we hit this magical moment in our country when we have $53 trillion of debt. So folks, what's wrong with a country that has $53 trillion of debt? Or is everything peachy keen? Well, did you know that if we had $53 trillion of debt, that all of the revenue flowing into the US Treasury at that point under today's tax rates would only be enough to pay the interest on all that debt, let alone any principal, let alone a single dollar for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or anything else we listed on that screen. David Walker was so concerned about this that in 2008, he resigned. and started to crisscross the country, raising the warning cry to whoever would listen. In 2010, he wrote a book called Come Back America, in which he sort of diagnosed the problem. He appeared on NPR to talk about the book, and he told the radio show hostess, he said, hey, look, tax rates have to double or we are going to go broke as a country. And she didn't believe him. So he says, look, I can give you one 4-letter word to explain why tax rates have to double. And she couldn't figure out what it was. So they opened up the phone lines and people started to call in, and nobody could figure out what that one 4-letter word was to explain why tax rates have to double. They heard debt, they heard kids, they heard jobs, they heard fear, they heard wars. One guy even said health. They said HEA. No, that's not going to work. What is that 4-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double? It's math. What does David Walker mean by math? Well, basically what he say, look, if this is what you're spending and this is what's coming in, you either have to double what's coming in, cut in half what's going out, or some combination of two. It's simple math. I remember I was giving the same presentation 2 days before midterm elections in a little city called Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And when I was done, everyone came up to me and they said, Dave, who should we vote for? Who should we vote for? And I never felt so powerful. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter who you vote for, because whoever gets elected is going to inherit a math problem, the solution to which involves either doubling taxes, reducing spending by half, or some combination of the two. All right, let's get serious. How many of you guys watch cartoons? Raise your hand if you watch cartoons. Okay, a couple of you. How many of you guys have ever watched a cartoon? Well, let me see those hands go up. Okay, so only Dave has ever watched a cartoon. Oh, see, Stephen has as well. Well, how many of you guys have ever seen the Roadrunner? Well, who's always trying to kill the Roadrunner? That's right, Wile E. Coyote. Well, a couple of years ago, I was watching the Roadrunner, and in this particular episode, the coyote was trying to kill the Roadrunner. He was building a bomb with which to do so. What company makes his bombs? That's right, Acme. Okay, so he's building a bomb made by Acme inside a shed that was also made by Acme. And he was so focused and intent on finishing this bomb that he didn't realize that the Roadrunner had pushed his shed onto the train tracks. Maybe you've seen the episode. And he was so focused and intent on finishing this bomb that he also didn't realize until the last possible moment that there was a huge freight train bearing down on him. Now, very important question, most important question I'm going to ask today. If you found yourselves on a train track with a huge freight train bearing down on you, what would you do? Well, you'd probably haul yourself to safety, right? Well, let's go back to the coyote. Coyote sees this huge freight train bearing down on him, and instead of jumping out of the way, what does he do? He simply pulls down the window shade, thinking that the act of doing so would make the problem go away. Did the problem go away? No, there's a huge explosion. And does a coyote ever really die? No, it's frustrating, right? But as the smoke and fire cleared away, you can see him sort of limping off screen, very much the worse for wear. Well, why did we gather here today virtually to talk about the Roadrunner? Well, as Americans who do most of our saving for retirement in what we call tax-deferred vehicles like 401ks and IRAs, we have a very real freight train that's bearing down on us. And it's bearing down on us in the form of what? In the form of higher taxes. And we got a couple of choices of what we can do about it. We can pretend like the problem doesn't really exist. We can pretend like the math to which David Walker referred doesn't really add up, but isn't that a little bit like pulling down that window shade? Or we can implement some strategies starting right now that can help remove us from the train tracks, thereby insulating and buffering us from the impact of higher taxes. So what we're going to do in the balance of our time is we're going to talk about some of those strategies you can utilize starting right now to get yourselves off the tracks. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to just go into a quick case study. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, 50 years old, they make $100,000 per year. They want to retire in 15 years, and they're obviously very, very happy. Now, just to lay a little bit of groundwork, there's millions of different types of investments out there. There's all sorts of different ways that you can save money for retirement. But I'm here to tell you that no matter where you save those retirement dollars, they all fit into basically 3 types of accounts. How's that for easy? There's only 3 basic types of accounts within which to save money in retirement. Today, we're going to talk about these accounts in terms of buckets of money. First bucket we're going to talk about briefly is what we call the taxable bucket, meaning every year as your money grows, you get to pay a tax. We're talking CDs, money markets, mutual funds. These are generally very, very good for emergency funds. So we should really only have about 6 months worth of basic living expenses. Second bucket is what we call the tax deferred bucket, 401ks, IRAs. 2 things, different rules apply to them, but 2 things they have in common. First thing they have in common, generally speaking, when you put money in, you get a tax deduction. So for example, you make $100,000 per year, you put $10,000 into your 401k, what's your new taxable income? That's right, $90,000. Second thing they have in common is the manner in which they're taxed upon distribution. Now the IRS has a special word that they use to characterize this income when you take it out. What do they call this income when you take it out? They call it ordinary income. Ordinary income. So what does that mean? That means that when you put money into your 401k, all you really did was defer the receipt of that income till some point much further down the road. And when you take the money out, at what rate are you taxed? Whatever the tax rate happens to be in the year you take that money out. So folks, isn't that a little bit like going into a business partnership with the IRS, and every year the IRS gets to vote on what percentage of your profits they get to keep? Sound like a good business partnership to anyone? So you could have $1 million in your IRA, but unless you can accurately predict what tax rates are going to be in the year you take that money out, do you really know how much money you have? The answer is no, and it's pretty hard to plan for retirement if you don't know how much money you have. All right, let's talk about a third bucket. Third bucket has all sorts of different names. Some people call it tax advantage, some call it tax preferred, some call it tax exempt. Me, I like to call it tax free. Now, to be truly tax free, it's got to qualify in two different ways. First way, it's got to really be tax free, free from federal tax, free from state tax, free from capital gains tax. Second thing I'm looking for is when you take money out, it should not count as provisional income. You guys have heard of provisional income? If you haven't heard of provisional income, don't feel badly. I gave the same talk to 100 CPAs a couple of years ago. So then you guys have heard of provisional income? How many hands do you think went up? Only two. Only two of the CPAs recognize the phrase provisional income, which is scary because what's provisional income? That's the income that the IRS tracks to determine if they are going to tax your Social Security. What counts as provisional income? Well, any 1099s coming out of your taxable bucket count as provisional income. Any distributions at all out of your tax deferred bucket count as provisional income, and 1/2 of your Social Security counts as provisional income. So the IRS adds all this provisional income up, and if as a single person it adds up to more than 34,000, or if as a married couple it adds up to more than 44,000, then guess what? Up to 85% of your Social Security can become taxable to you at your highest marginal tax bracket. Folks, I'm making a big deal about this because I've done the math 100 times in 100 different ways on 100 different clients, and this is what I've concluded. I have concluded that when your Social Security gets taxed, you run out of money 5 to 7 years faster than people who do not have their Social Security tax. Why? Because the act of compensating for Social Security taxation forces you to spend down all your other assets that much faster. All right, let's get into Mr. and Mrs. Jones' case study here. Let's say they got a $500,000 in their IRA. They got 100,000 in plain old taxable mutual funds. That's their emergency fund in the taxable bucket. They're putting 10% into their 401k. They're getting no match, no free money. They're paying $2,000 per year for some term life insurance and $4,000 per year for some long-term care insurance. Now, if this couple were to walk into a traditional tax-deferred financial advisor's office, how would the conversation go? Well, just so happens I've been training traditional tax-deferred financial advisors for the last 17 years of my life. And in the act of doing so, I have sat in their offices and I've listened to them as they've spoken to people like this for the very first time. And here's how the conversation goes. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, congratulations. They always congratulate you. You've done a great job saving money in this IRA. Problem is, last year down the road, you only earned 7%. We think we can get you 8%, so roll all that money over to us. As far as your mutual funds go, that's a great emergency fund. Problem is, last year down the road, you only earned 3%. We think we can get you 5%, so let us manage that for you as well. As far as your 401k with no match goes, keep on doing it. When you switch jobs, give us a call. We'll roll your 401k into your IRA, get everything under one roof, maybe save you some break points. As far as your term life insurance and long-term care insurance goes, gosh, not really what we do, but who are we to say you shouldn't keep doing it? And that is a conversation, folks, I've heard literally dozens and dozens of times. Well, when someone like this walks into my office for the very first time, I see red flags all over the place. For example, I'm not so much concerned with what's in this IRA today. What keeps me awake at night is what it's going to be worth 15 years from now if it grows at 8% per year. What's it going to be worth 15 years from now if it grows at 8% per year? 1.6 million. Folks, I know this sounds great, but what's wrong with having 1.6 million in your IRA? Well, folks, did you know that if you have 1.6 million in your IRA, the required minimum distributions alone on 1.6 million will put you in one of the higher marginal federal tax brackets and literally guarantee that your Social Security will be taxable in perpetuity with all of the compensating spend down that goes along with it. So what we want to do is we want to prevent this IRA from growing. We want to prevent it from ever getting to 1.6 million. So here's my question for you folks. How do you prevent an IRA from growing? And don't anyone say, put it in the stock market. Well, one of my very favorite ways is to do what we call a Roth conversion. A Roth conversion simply says that if you have money in your IRA, you can shift it to tax-free so long as you pay what along the way? Taxes. At what rate? whatever the rate happens to be in the year you do the conversion. So let's say that Mr. and Mrs. Jones, they convert the entire thing all in 1 year, not recommending it, but let's just say that they did. And they pay 40% tax. How much tax are they going to owe on that conversion? $200,000. Now, here's the problem. Do Mr. and Mrs. Jones have $200,000 just lying around that they can earmark for this tax bill? The answer is no, they don't have it. So some people say, Dave, that's okay. They don't need to have it. Just have the IRS withhold the tax from the Roth conversion itself. Folks, what would happen if a couple of 50-year-olds paid the tax on their Roth conversion out of the IRA itself? They'd get a 10% penalty. The IRS says, even if you take money out and you give it right back to the IRS in the form of a tax, if you're younger than 59 and a half when you do so, they will charge you a 10% penalty. So what's the rule of thumb here, folks? Unless you got a lot of money just languishing in your taxable bucket that you would gladly earmark for the tax on that Roth conversion, I would probably recommend that you wait until 59 and a half before you start thinking about Roth conversions. So that begs the question, is there any other way to get money out of this IRA pre-59 and a half without penalty? Well, at this point, I may bring up that little known section of the IRS tax code. It's section 72, subsection T. In our industry, we call it a 72T. And the 72T says that you can take money out of that IRA pre-59 and a half without penalty, so long as you do it in separate, equal yearly distributions that last for at least 5 years or until 59 and a half, whichever is longer. These days, a couple of 50-year-olds could take out about 5% per year. So if Mr. and Mrs. Jones did a 72T, they could shift $25,000 per year out of their IRA into the tax-free bucket. All right, let's talk about these mutual funds. If that's their emergency fund, how do we feel about it? Do they have too much or too little in that emergency fund? Well, if they make $100,000 per year, they should probably have much closer to $50,000. So not only do they have too much, but they're growing into mutual funds, which means in theory, the problem's getting bigger every year. So what we want to do is we want to take the growth on that mutual fund plus some of the principal, and we want to shift it from taxable to tax-free, little by little, year by year, so that by the time they reach 65, they've got the perfect amount. I've done the match on that. I've done the math on that. That would require a $6,000 shift each and every year for the next 15 years. All right, how do we feel about 401ks that don't have matches? Folks, this is the one thing that Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, and Clark Howard actually agree upon. The rule of thumb when it comes to 401ks is you put in up to the match, but not 1 penny above and beyond. You do whatever is required to get the free money, then you move on to the next best thing. Well, if these folks are trying to prevent their IRA from growing by doing a 72T, yet they're putting money hand over fist into their 401k and they're getting no free money, are those two strategies at odds with each other? The answer is yes, that's a conflicted strategy. So what we want to do is we want to recapture that 10%. 10% of 100,000 is 10,000. We want to shift that to tax-free. How do we feel about term life insurance and long-term care insurance? We feel like it's incredibly important to mitigate both of these risks, either one of which can really upset your financial outlook. But we feel like sometimes, not always, sometimes there can be a better way to do so. So we may recapture that money as well. So all told, we just freed up $47,000 to be able to reposition to tax-free. Well, usually at this point, someone will say, hey, Dave, not so fast. You don't really have 47,000 freed up. And I'll say, why not? And they'll say, because some of those recommendations that you made are actually taxable events. And you know what? They're right. That 72T is a taxable event. And when you put less money into your 401k, that increases your taxable income. So that's also a taxable event. So all told, because of this strategy, we just realized an additional $35,000 of taxable income. Let's call that a 30% tax on the margin. That means if we do this strategy, each and every year we do it, we're going to have to pay an additional $10,500 in tax. Folks, do Mr. and Mrs. Jones have $10,500 just lying around that they would love to earmark for this tax bill? Not that they would love. And if we say, quit going out to eat, quit going on vacation, pull back the belt a couple of notches just so you can pay that tax bill, will they return my phone calls? Probably not. So we got to find a way to help them pay that tax bill such that we are not encroaching on their lifestyle. So what I may recommend is that they simply pay that tax right out of the $47,000 we just freed up on the previous screen, which means we really have $36,500 per year to be able to reposition it tax-free. So folks, this is where the rubber hits the road. Where can we put $36,500 per year such that it grows in a truly tax-free way? Well, at this point, I'm going to recommend that they fully fund one of my very favorite tax-free investments, and that's what we call a Roth IRA. And you guys have heard of Roth IRAs? Hey, how much money can two 50-year-olds put into Roth IRAs these days? $7,000 each for a total of $14,000 per year. By the way, why do I like Roth IRAs so much? Because so long as you're 59 and a half, when you take the money out, you don't pay any of those taxes you talked about. No federal, no state, no capital gains tax. Not only that, when you take money out of your Roth IRA, it does not count as provisional income. It does not count against the threshold, which causes Social Security taxation. Roth IRAs are truly tax-free. By the way, when I say Roth IRA, I'm talking any investment with the word Roth in front of it. It could be a Roth IRA, Roth 401k, Roth conversion. They're all truly tax-free. So we contribute $7,000 per year to their IRAs. That leaves us with $22,500. Where can we put $22,500 per year such that it grows in a truly tax-free way? Well, at this point, I may bring up a bucket of money that gets treated differently for tax purposes than anything else we've talked about so far. What happens with this bucket is you put money in. As your money grows, your bucket begins to fill. Only the IRS says that the growth on the money in this bucket is going to be treated under a different section of the IRS tax code than anything else we've talked about so far. What does that section of the IRS tax code say? It says that you can touch your money pre-59 and a half without penalty. Can you do that in your IRA or 401k? No, you cannot. They're going to tell you that as your money grows, you receive no 1099s. What does that mean? That means no tax as your money grows. They're also going to tell you that when you take the money out, if you take it out the right way, it will not show up as reportable income on your tax return. What does that mean? That means it's tax-free and it does not count as provisional income. They're also going to tell you that there are no contribution limits. What do we say were the contribution limits for that Roth IRA? $7,000 each for a total of $14,000 per year for a married couple. Folks, I got clients that do $50 a month. I got clients that do $200,000 per year, and everywhere in between. There are no limits on how much you put into this bucket. They're also going to tell you that there are no income limitations. Let me ask you a question. Can Bill Gates do a Roth IRA? The answer is no. Why? He makes too much money. You start making north of $214,000 in modified adjusted gross income, you can no longer do a Roth IRA. Can my children, the youngest of whom is 7, do Roth IRAs? The answer is to do a Roth IRA, you have to have earned income. My kids work, I just don't pay them. By the way, none of these rules apply to this particular bucket. They're also going to tell you that if history serves as a model, there may be no legislative risk. What do I mean? Well, they changed the rules on this bucket 3 different times in 82, 84, and 88. And every single time they changed the rules, they simply said, whoever has the bucket before the rule changes gets to keep it and continue to put money into it under the old rule for the rest of their lives. What do we call that kind of a clause? We call that a grandfather clause. Well, usually right about now, people say, well, gosh, Dave, this is like the perfect bucket. This is like the alignment of the stars. Why not just put all my eggs into this basket? Well, first of all, is it ever a good idea to put all your eggs into any one basket? The answer is no. Not only that, but the IRS says if they're going to give you the benefit of an unlimited bucket of tax-free dollars, they're going to require that there be a cost of admission. They're going to require that there be a spigot attached to the side of that bucket through which flows on a monthly basis some expenses. And what do those expenses go towards? They go towards some administrative fees, but they primarily go towards the cost of term life insurance. Now, let me ask you a question. If your house is paid off, your kids have moved out, you're rapidly approaching retirement, is term life insurance really all that high on your wish list? The answer is no. It's usually right about now that people start dumping their term life insurance, and the companies that sponsor these programs recognize that. So they've done something to sweeten the pot. They simply say that in the event that somewhere down the road you should need long-term care, they will give you your death benefit while you're alive for the purpose of paying for it. Here's an example. Say you got a $400,000 death benefit. You wake up one day, you can no longer feed yourself, bathe yourself, transfer yourself, what have you. Find one doctor to write one letter to that effect. They'll start sending you 25% of that death benefit, or $100,000 per year every year for 4 years for the purpose of paying for long-term care. Now, they may discount that number slightly based on the age in which you're receiving that benefit, but the point is this: they're willing to give you your death benefit while you're alive for the purpose of paying for long-term care. Folks, how many of you guys have looked into traditional long-term care insurance? Number one, is it cheap? No, it's getting more and more expensive all the time. Number two, can it be hard to qualify? Sure, you might live to be 120, but if you have a bad back, a bad knee, a bad hip, you may not even get accepted. And what happens if you pay for 30 years and die peaceful in your sleep, never having needed it? Do they send you all your money back at the end? The answer is no. It goes to pay for someone else's benefit. And that can be a source of heartburn for a lot of different people because nobody wants to pay for something they hope they never have to use. Why is this different? This is different because if you die peacefully in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed long-term care, guess what? Someone's still getting a death benefit, probably your kids or grandkids. So there isn't that sensation of having paid for something you hope you never have to use. By the way, have Mr. and Mrs. Jones here already bought off on the idea that they need term life insurance and long-term care insurance? Sure, they've already budgeted for it. All we're suggesting maybe is instead of sending that money off to an insurance company in the form of a premium payment, why not recapture it, dump it into their bucket, let a portion of it drip out in the form of expenses, and now take advantage of a huge bucket of tax-free dollars that wasn't previously available to you. By the way, what do we call this bucket? It's chapter 5 of my book, The Power of Zero. We call it an LIRP. What does that stand for? It stands for Life Insurance Retirement Plan. Why life insurance? Because the IRS says in order for this bucket to work, you got to be willing to pay for some life insurance. You got to have a need for life insurance. Why retirement plan? Because one of the ancillary goals of this bucket is to build money up so that somewhere down the road you can take money out and spend it on your lifestyle at a period in time when tax rates are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. Okay, before I go any further, I've got a very important question to ask, and it's simply this. If you could be in any tax bracket of your choosing in retirement, which tax bracket would you choose? Well, if you're anything like me, you choose a 0% tax bracket. Well, if what Mr. and Mrs. Jones want is to be in the 0% tax bracket, tell me how we're doing so far. They're going to have money coming out of their Roth IRA. So long as they're 59 and a half when they take that money out, will they pay tax? No tax. They're going to have a lot of money coming out of their LIRP, regardless of how old they are when they take that money out. Will they pay tax? No tax. Now, let's go back to that IRA. You guys remember that IRA? That $500,000 IRA? Our goal in doing the 72T was simply to prevent that IRA from getting any bigger. If we did a good job of preventing that IRA from getting any bigger, how much money should Mr. and Mrs. Jones still have in that IRA by the time they reach 65? $500,000, right? We didn't want to shrink it, just didn't want to grow it. We want to keep it at $500,000. So here's my question for you. If at age 65, Mr. and Mrs. Jones have $500,000 in that IRA, is there any way that they can take money out of there, spend it on their lifestyle, not pay tax, and it's got to be legal? Well, remember, if you retire today, absent any other deductions, by the way, most of your deductions do disappear by the time your kids have moved out, house is paid off, not contributing to your 401k anymore. Most of those deductions disappear by the time you reach retirement. So the IRS says, hey, given that reality and in our infinite goodness, we will provide you with a deduction. They call that the standard deduction, which if you retire today as a married couple is $25,900. What does that mean? That means that you can experience income from any number of sources up to $25,900 without paying any tax at all. Question, does the IRS index this number to keep up with inflation? The answer is yes. Historically, they have by 3% per year. So in theory, by the time they reach 65, their standard deduction is going to be much closer to $40,350, which begs the question, if at age 65, they have $40,350 worth of standard deduction, how much could they take out of that IRA without paying any tax at all? $40,350. So folks, what's the moral of the story? So long as you only take out up to whatever your standard deduction happens to be in any given year, you now have an IRA that's 100% tax-free. And if you have tax-free, 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 and you can stay below your provisional income thresholds, what do you suppose happens to your Social Security? Tax-free. And if you have no tax, no tax, no tax, no tax, what tax bracket does that put you in? 0%. Folks, why do I make such a big deal about being in the 0% tax bracket? Well, if we can't get you the 0% tax bracket, what's the next best tax bracket? And don't anyone say 1. That's right. It goes all the way up to 10, throw in another 6% for state. Now we're talking 16%. And if what David Walker says comes true and tax rates have to double to keep our country solvent, what happens to 16? 32. All of a sudden, second place isn't looking all that great. All right. Now I love it when things make sense mathematically, but I love when things make sense conceptually, but I love it even more when they make sense mathematically. So what I did for Mr. and Mrs. Jones is what we call before and after comparison. I simply said, hey, had you guys never met me and kept on doing exactly what you're doing, and taxes somehow, some way stayed at about 30% for the rest of our lives, how much money would you be able to spend after tax? And according to my math, able to spend just shy of $4.4 million. I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. The problem is they run out of money at age 85, at which point they can either die or move in with their kids. Conversely, if they did everything we talked about today, give them the 0% tax bracket, get their Social Security tax free, they can now spend nearly $8 million. They never run out of money. They still have 1.4 million left over at the end. Now people say, hey, gosh, Dave, how come there's such a big difference in those columns? And you know what I tell them? I say, when you make little tiny strategic changes midway through your life, and you amortize the benefit of those changes out over the balance of your life, there can be a massive quantum difference on the back end. More importantly, what happens to the blue column on the left if tax rates double? Does it get bigger or smaller? It gets smaller. What happens to the gray column on the right if tax rates double? It stays exactly the same. Why? Because if you're in the 0% tax bracket and the tax rates double, 2 times 0 is still 0. Folks, that is what we call the power of 0. All right. I get a lot of different questions. I'm going to go over one of the questions just because this is sort of an abbreviated form of my presentation. I'm only going to go through one of the questions. The most popular question I get is simply this. And I usually give these presentations to people who are between 50 and 67. And they always come up to me afterwards. They say, Dave, am I too old to get to the 0% tax bracket? And you know how I respond to that question? I simply say, you know what? Throughout 2018, filmmaker Doug Orchard and I crisscrossed the country, interviewing all of the experts in academia about the national debt as it relates to the future of tax rates. Take a listen to what they had to say. You hear that, David? You hear a ticking sound? Okay.
The truth is the federal government has lost control of the budget.
Instead of paying for all the new initiatives, whether they're tax cuts, spending increases, all sorts of things that we like, the government's just putting it all on the national credit card. And as a result, our national debt is just going up and up and up. And it's growing faster than the economy. And that's when you know you have a real problem.
Everything is going to be squeezed out of the budget. There won't be anything left.
The road we're on is a perilous one that ultimately leads to the bankrupting of our country.
So we have a crisis on our hands.
All Congress has to do for this whole situation to come to a head is nothing. Because every year that they do nothing makes the problem even more unsolvable.
We don't seem to have the ability to get along and find common ground.
Is the government trying to trick you right now? Then the answer is very simply yes.
So why is this being swept under the rug? Why is nobody talking about this?
Probably because it's not popular.
So I've actually been traveling around the country for about 4 years now, taking the power of 0 message to different groups.
When you cut taxes on current generations, you are simultaneously raising them on future generations.
It is all driven by spending. Once we have spent a dollar, we've already decided to tax it. The only question is whether we tax it now or we borrow it now and tax it in the future.
So to make up for the liabilities that we're incurring with all the promises we've made in social insurance programs, we're going to have to increase substantially the tax rate and perhaps even double it.
Now, precisely how high it's going to be, there's a lot of room to debate, but people will have to pay more taxes.
People's retirement savings are at risk of future higher taxes.
Well, qualified plans really do 2 things. They defer the tax and the tax calculation. Now let that run past your brain real slow.
I'm driven by trying to help as many people as I can avoid this disaster that's going to come up in retirement when taxes go up and the market goes down. What are these people going to do if they haven't planned ahead of time?
Okay, so all of these experts are reading the same music and they're singing the same song. They're simply saying that if we don't change course right now, that 10 years from now, tax rates will have to rise dramatically or we go broke as a nation. Some of them even use the D word as it relates to the future of tax rates. Tax rates will have to double or we go broke as a country. So the real question in my mind is not, are you too old to get to the 0% tax bracket? The real question you should be asking yourself is, will you be alive in 2030? Because if 2030 rolls around and tax rates double, will you look back at the year 2022 and say, why did I not take advantage of tax rates while they were historically low? Because all tax rates have to do in the future is go up by 1% for the math here to make sense. So a couple of takeaways for you. Takeaway number 1, tax rates in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. Mathematically speaking, we're beyond the point of no return. Takeaway number 2, the only way to truly insulate yourself from the impact of higher taxes is to get to the 0% tax bracket. Why? Because if tax rates double, 2 times 0 is still 0. Takeaway number 3, as of 2018, tax rates are on sale. And the rub here is that we know that tax sale has an expiration date, which means that every year between now and 2026 represents a little mini window of opportunity during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And every year that goes by where you fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2026 when you could be forced to pay the highest tax rates you're likely to see in your lifetime. The last takeaway is all of this is really, really good news for all of our clients and prospects. And the reason is, let me illustrate with a quick story. A couple months ago, a lady came up to me. She says, "Hey, Dave," this is at the end of my presentation. She said, "Hey, Dave, thanks a lot. Now I'm in a really bad mood." I said, "Why are you in such a bad mood?" She says, "Because I got all my money in the tax-deferred bucket." And I said, "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You contributed money to your tax-deferred bucket at a period in time when tax rates were much higher than they are today. You got a deduction of those higher rates for doing so. You now have a 4-year period of time during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. So you can get all those assets, systematically reposition the tax-free so that by the time tax rates potentially double over time, you've done all the heavy lifting, you can then take that money out tax-free." I said, "Is that why you're in such a bad mood?" And she says, "Well, gosh, Dave, I never really thought about it that way." So how's the story going to end for most Americans? Well, I would submit that so long as they take advantage of the next 4 years of historically low tax rates, that they get to determine how much of their hard-earned retirement savings that they get to spend. All right, usually right about now, financial advisors will say, "Hey, Dave, this is a really important message." And by the way, can we agree that this is an important message? They'll say, "Dave, this is a really important message. How am I supposed to bottle this up and unleash it on my clients and prospects?" I said, "Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do it." I said, "The first way is I can send you the script for this presentation. It's only 52 pages long, single-spaced typewritten. And you can go give this presentation to your clients." But I said, there may be an easier way. I have written a book called The Power of Zero. The Power of Zero is the book version of the presentation that you guys have seen. For those of you who have read The Power of Zero, does it follow this presentation pretty closely? Yeah, so this is a great way to set the table for this type of conversation with people who have huge amounts of money in their tax-deferred bucket, and they need to go through that paradigm shift. If you guys are interested, by the way, for the next 24 hours, if you would like to order at least 10 copies of The Power of Zero, you'll get free shipping, and that's at davidmcknightbooks.com. If ever there were a time in your life where you wanted to get copies of the Power of Zero, it's now. Why? Because if you look at the price for this book on Amazon and you look at the price for this book at davidmcknightbooks.com, the price is not even close. You're going to save a lot more money if we waive the shipping for you by going to davidmcknightbooks.com. This offer, I'm instructing my assistant to waive the shipping. It'll show up on your screen, but she'll waive it on the back end. I'm instructing her to waive the shipping for the next 24 hours. So if you buy at least 10 copies of any of my books at David McKnight Books, you can mix and match. We will waive shipping, and you will never get these books cheaper than you will in the next 24 hours. I also have an online video course. If you want to sort of transition your practice to a Power of Zero style practice, you want to become the tax-free planning expert in your community, pick up your phone right now and text ZERO to 320-300-0 or 320-300-9376. And that will opt you into a free 3-part video series. Each video is about 25 minutes long, and I walk you through step by step how to transition your practice to a Power Zero planning practice. And by the way, there's a lot of pitfalls that stand along that stand in the path along the way to becoming experts at this. Allow me to bend that curve in your favor. Don't flop around for 20 years like me trying to figure out how all this stuff works. Let me take my cumulative knowledge and let you use that as a springboard so you're not trying to bend this curve in your favor. So text 0 to 320-300-0. You'll get opted into that free online video course. By the way, the reason I'm in Houston is because tomorrow we have one of our monthly boot camps. If you're in the Houston area, you can go to the website's up here in the corner, powerzero.com/bootcamp. powerzero.com/bootcamp, and you can choose between 2 different boot camps. And during this boot camp, I'm going to show you what I do every year to become a top of the table producer. Not just a top of the table producer, but a double top of the table producer. What can you do to really transform your career? I'm going to lift up the hood of my practice, show you everything from A to Z on how to become a top of the table producer, all within a year. So if you want to learn how to do that and you want to spend the day with me, There's still time to register for the boot camp tomorrow if you're in the Houston area. Otherwise, our next one is in Orlando, and that's later in April. And if you want to learn more about me, you can go to powerzero.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter. You can take a look at my YouTube channel. There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube that I'm starting to post more and more. And then my podcast. I know some of you guys listen to my podcast. Every week I come out with a new podcast, Power Zero. Subscribe to that. That'd be terrific. Other than that, you guys have been great. I think we got a few minutes left. We can answer some questions, Dave, if you want to open it up for some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Wow, that was really, really good. I added a comment myself just saying that the limits of Social Security taxation have not changed since the early 1980s. And I think we've had a little thing called inflation since then. And I think that's kind of a buzzword today. If anybody wants to talk about just the price of gas. But the fact is that those limits have been frozen. So more and more people are going to have their Social Security included in their taxation if nobody does anything. It's kind of a silent tax that if they don't realize it's there, that's going to happen. Jesse Braun asks, is there a Canadian equivalent of this training? And if not, can we collaborate to bring your concepts to Canada as well?
Yeah, I don't know the first thing about the Canadian tax system, honestly. So I can't tell you if, if this stuff is applicable to Canada. I don't know how their Social Security system works. So I'm not gonna opine on whether all of this translates. I'd have to really look into it, and it would have to be a significant commitment on my part. So I don't know the answer to that question.
I know that life insurance works a little bit differently in terms of their tax-free nature, just because you can take up to your basis, and anything above that becomes taxable. So I know that that's a different thing there in Canada. Other there, will Sir McKnight be visiting SoCal for a boot camp this year? You know, he was going to be here in Phoenix. Was it Phoenix? Yeah, Phoenix last year. I missed that one. That was in December. Any plans to be here in California?
Yeah, I think we're going to have one in Los Angeles later in the year.
Nice. Then I will make plans, and Stephen is my neighbor here to the left of me here in Corona. So maybe we'll carpool. Okay. Can you put the info about getting the 10 books free delivery again? So I think just that slide.
Yes.
DavidMcKnightBooks.com.
There you go.
Okay, Jesse Braun is saying a lot of it rolls over, but some would need updating. The concepts are still true. Okay, and there is the website. Do you have a recommendation on best IUL carriers? Top 3. What are your thoughts?
I wrote a whole book about the ideal IUL. There's eight or 9 things that an IUL has to have if I'm going to be married to it. That book is called Look Before You LIRP. There's only a couple of companies that align in every particular. I really like Allianz. I like North American. Those are the 2 that I really look at. There's a lot of other ones that come really close, but they fall short, in 1 or 2 ways. Maybe they don't have a guaranteed 0% loan. Maybe they do monthly sweeps instead of daily or weekly sweeps. Maybe they do interest in advance versus interest in arrears. So there's lots of different things. If you're going to be married to an IUL for the next 40 to 50 years, you don't want to wake up one day 20 years from now like, oh my gosh, not only was my loan provision not guaranteed, it's now an 8% cost to get money out of. IUL's got to be tax-free and cost-free. They're all tax-free just because of the IRS tax code, but the cost of getting the money out, that's the real question. So it's got to be tax-free and cost-free.
Okay, excellent. And would you say that Midland would be in that category too? Because Midland's the flip side of North America,
right.
Same group. Okay.
Yeah, they really Midland North American really blazed the trail with a guaranteed 0% loan, and a lot of companies fell in line once they realized that they had a competitive disadvantage. So, but there's really only a couple that have that guaranteed 0.
Okay, absolutely. Bob Vowell asks, what is the fee for the boot camp?
No fee for the boot camp. We are going to tell you all about our flagship marketing program, the one that I use to become a top of the table producer every year. There's no fee to come. There are some, as you sign up for the boot camp, we asked you a couple of questions to make sure you're the right fit for our program. So there are some sort of pre-qualifying questions, but there's no fee for you to come.
Wonderful. So we're adding the power of zero to the cost of the boot camp. So that's kind of nice. Okay. On the Facebook chat, Lane Paul asks, any additional boot camps in Texas this year?
I don't think so, but this is the type of thing where if we're a couple of states over, you're going to want to spend the day with us. If that means you have to fly or drive and spend the night in a hotel. We used to only do these things in Chicago, and we packed the room every time we did them. Now we're sort of doing them a little bit more regionally. We do basically 11 to 12 per year. So there may but not be a guarantee that we're going to be in your state, but if we're pretty close, you should probably think about spending the day with us.
Awesome. Lane Paul also asked, what about F&G, Fidelity and Guarantee? I don't know if there's something about their product. I'm not an expert. Was there anything about their product, or just it just doesn't fit your 9 criteria?
There's another Brett, I think his name is Brett Anderson, IUL Digest. He came out with another document called the 26 IUL Deal Breakers, and North American / Midland and Allianz were the only 2 companies that didn't have any of the 26 deal breakers. F&G had, if memory serves, had quite a few, but they may have changed their product since then. But so that's all I know.
Okay, fair enough. Absolutely. Okay, those are the questions that we've had so far. This was very educational, very powerful, and very quick. You went right through this, and so I'm really glad that we're recording it, at least to Facebook. I'm pretty sure I can pull that down or something, and I'll upload it to YouTube. And if you want a copy of it, if you want to put on your channel, I could definitely send you a copy, a link to download and upload. Any other final questions? We've got one of the national speaking experts, and believe me, this is a great book. When I was on a couple of other events for funnel marketing and such, the number, in fact, it's for forgive me, Tyson Bailey. He's one of my other group experts. He does a lot of things for funnel building and such, and he said, get the Power of Zero book, sell that book, use that as the giveaway to get people to opt in for you to contact them. So this book and its reputation, especially on Amazon, this is one of the best books and the most authoritative book you can get on this kind of concept. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Charles asked book club resources. I'm not sure about what he's asking there. You talk about for a study group, Charles, like for an agent's study group, or wait, was that you, Charles? I know you're in here. I didn't hear you. Unmute. Okay, try again. I didn't hear you. Yes, for an agent study group. So any resources to help agents with their studying on this? The only thing I could think of is the tax code. So,
well, I tell people that the Power of Zero book is the textbook. I mean, until you've mastered all of the concepts, and there's a lot of stuff in there. Until you've mastered all of those concepts, that should be what you're studying. You can listen to your car. It's on Audible. You can read it on Kindle. You can get a hardback. I would focus on learning the concepts, and of course, my follow-up to that also through Penguin Random House is Tax-Free Income for Life, which covers how annuities fit into the 0% paradigm and how you can, mitigate tax rate risk and longevity risk within the very same financial plan. Most financial advisors don't know how to mitigate both, because if you have an annuity, it's in your tax deferred bucket. You're taking lifetime income out of your tax deferred bucket. What if tax rates go up? You're exposed to tax rate risk. Or they say, we need to get all the money into, keep it liquid so we can do Roth conversions, what have you. So you can't do an annuity. So you can protect yourself from tax rate risk, but not longevity risk. So how do you mitigate both of those risks within the very same financial plan? Tax-Free Income for Life teaches you how to do that. So those 2 books are really great textbooks for you.
Excellent. Yeah, and there are annuity strategies, especially some that are just so often overlooked, quite frankly. Mitch, you asked, got the book a few years ago. Has there been any significant updates?
It got updated and revised in 2018, so that's the most recent. So if you have one that's before that, you're definitely going to want to get the 2018 version. That's the hardback. The one before that was a paperback.
Perfect. And by the way, if you stop by a Barnes and Noble that he has visited, you might get a signed copy. I keep seeing him posting when you're autographing there. I keep wondering if anybody's going to say, "Why are you signing that book?" But
right. I have people tell me that they go and they sign them as if they were David McKnight.
Oh boy.
I am posting how to register for the boot camp in the chat, powerzero.com/bootcamp.
Wonderful. All right.
And I do have a hard stop here, David.
Okay.
But if anybody wants to send me, I'm not going to actually put my public email in here, but you can go to powerzero.com and put your question in the contact form, and I'm happy to answer it that way.
Wonderful. And he does answer. He really does. So at least he does for me. So, and I don't abuse that. So wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. This has been very valuable. Appreciate you adding to the content and the discussions that we have in the Facebook group. It's really beneficial and really excited that you're a part of it. So thank you so much. It's really been helpful.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to hit end and then